Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, you can see I have a Rolex Oyster Perpetual 36mm. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how I got the Rolex and what it means to own a modern Rolex versus vintage, and just my honest thoughts on this 36mm Oyster Perpetual. So how did I get this watch? Well, I was on the wait list for this watch for 4 years, if you can believe it. So if you go back all the way to 2020, when these watches were first announced, I went immediately to my Rolex dealer, my local dealer, and I told them, hey, I heard there's the new Oyster Perpetuals. Can I get on the wait list? And of course, they put me on the wait list. And then for the next 4 years, I would visit not dealership, sorry, the jewelry store, the dealer. I would visit them, probably once every 6 to 8 months, and I would ask them, what's the status of my waitlist order? Is it gonna come soon? Any changes, any updates? And every single time they said that, oh, sorry, like you gotta wait a little bit longer. Like it's such in demand, it might take another year or two. And they just kept saying that over and over and over again. So honestly, I kind of forgot about it. I thought to myself, it's fine. I don't need it. But I would still check in every now and then. And in the meantime, I would actually buy vintage Rolexes. So if you go into my channel, you'll see that I first purchased a Rolex Air King. I forgot the 5500, an Air King 5500. And I, wore that for a little bit, but wasn't that satisfied. And then I got a Rolex Air King 14000 after that. So I wore that for a little bit. Again, I wasn't very satisfied. And then I also bought an Air Speed King, mostly because it was a good deal, but I soon sold that as well. So I did have some experience with Rolex beforehand, before I got this one that you're looking at. But the issue with vintage is that, oh, actually, no, sorry, let me go back. So yeah, I got those Rolexes in between. And then, yeah, basically one day this past summer in 2024, they called me and said they had this watch available for pickup. And my theory is that the reason why it's available now is because the watch market is slowing down. If you go onto websites like Watch Charts, which I highly recommend, they have a lot of good charts out there. You can see how the watch market is slowing down actually quite a bit. Like I think the watch market index has dropped by 30% in the past little while. So yeah, the watch market is not doing great, but that means that it's easier to acquire watches that were hard to acquire before. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this Rolex is actually quite attainable compared to something like a Daytona or a GMT Master. So, this is the Rolex. This is their entry lineup, and silver is their most foundational color. It's not flashy like pink or green or the discontinued yellow and red. So it's not a super rare occurrence that I got the call, but I was still very happy to get it. So that is how I got the watch. I basically waited 4 years. Let's move on. Let's talk about the differences between modern and vintage Rolex. The difference is night and day. I mean, both watches will have the word Rolex and both watches have the crown, but the heft, the weight and just the finishing on a new watch just outcompetes a vintage Rolex, hands down. Especially, the more affordable vintage Rolexes like the Air King. I can't speak for vintage Submariners or, vintage Daytonas or vintage, GMT Masters. But I can confidently say that, if you're looking at vintage Air Kings versus a modern Oyster Perpetual, this one just blows it out of the water. The quality is way better. So I don't regret selling my Air Kings. I think this is a much better watch. And what else can I say about this? Yeah, that's basically the main difference between the vintage Rolexes and the new ones. The new ones have so much more quality and heft and just better materials. This one is a chronometer versus the Air Kings of before were just non-chronometer certified. So yeah, every aspect. If you're interested in a simple minimalist Rolex, I would still recommend trying to get a modern Oyster Perpetual versus like a vintage Oyster Perpetual or vintage Air King, because, or even a vintage Datejust. I feel like the vintage Datejusts don't have as good, bracelet materials, everything. Of course, this is more expensive. I think it's about, I can't remember. It's like 7,000 Canadian dollars, somewhere around there. So of course it's more expensive, but I think it's worth it. That leads me to the last part of this video, and that's just talking about like, what do I think of this watch? And there's two things I want to focus on. One, this watch does nothing like spectacularly, right? Like I don't think the design is like groundbreaking. You're actually, it's quite a subtle watch. You may not get any comments or compliments because it kind of just blends into your outfit. But I think that's the strength of this watch as well, is that everything it does really, really well. So materials, yeah, no complaints here. It's sturdy, it feels well built, it's comfortable on the wrist. It's not titanium. I actually prefer that it's stainless steel. I'm actually not a huge fan of titanium. Stainless steel construction, everything's tight, everything is well built. You can see the case back. For those of you who don't know, Rolex does, for the most part, they do solid case backs. So materials is good. Design, super clean, right? It's really legible. I can read this in sunny conditions, cloudy conditions, off angles. I can read it really well. The dial, super clean. Sunburst dials aren't brand new, and it's not like Rolex has a patent on, sunburst dials, but the sunburst dial done here is very well done, especially, I wish I could show you, but when this watch is in like direct sunlight, it glows like gold. And that's because the hands and the indices, the borders of the indices are gold. So this actually, like in direct sunlight, it's almost like a gold watch, which that's also why I really like this model, is because of the gold and silver contrast is really nice. And you can see that the indices are well raised. So what do we go through? Materials, good. The design, timeless, legible. This will be in style for decades. This is a watch that you would pass on from generation to generation. The movement, it's chronometer. It's I think it's like a 70-hour power reserve. I wear this watch once every 2 days, so it hasn't died on me in a long time now. Let me get this on the wrist one more time. So you can see 36 millimeters in diameter, 43 millimeters lug to lug. What else? I think it's 11 millimeters thick, approximately 20 millimeter lugs on a 6-inch wrist. I mean, it's perfect. In fact, I could probably wear a 34 millimeter and it would still be comfortable. I think this watch, here, let me get this on my right wrist. I'd probably give you a better look since most people are right-handed. I'm also right-handed, but I wear my watches on my left. Sorry, on my right. So you can see this is the watch on my 6-inch wrist. Good sizing. I could even size down if I wanted. I think the 36 millimeters is just perfect. I think the 41 millimeters is a bit too big. So perfect sizing. And again, legibility is awesome. It's subtle, which actually some people appreciate more because they don't want a Rolex that, someone's gonna chop their arm off. So if you wear like a precious metal Rolex, you might attract too much attention. It does everything perfectly. I think that's the take-home message. It won't stand out, but it is, for me, it's the perfect watch. It's why I wanted it, and I waited 4 years for it. So, man, who is this for? It is for someone, I think this actually would be a good first watch. If you can get it at retail, I would not buy this watch above retail price. Try and get it at a dealer. I think if you're looking for an everyday watch or a dress watch or your first watch, your first luxury watch, this one ticks all those boxes. It just works. And for myself, I love this watch. Again, I wear it every second day. So this is my most worn watch of 2024. And probably 2025, I'll also wear it a lot just because it's it just makes sense to wear. Like it's perfect for me. I've had no complaints, which is very rare because I like to complain a lot. I feel like most watches that I own and that I've reviewed, there's usually like one thing where I would say, oh, like this should change, or I wish it was this. But this is one of the few watches where I can confidently say, you know, there's nothing I would change about this watch. I think the price is, you know, not bad. Again, it's like 7K, 7,000 Canadian, which I think is appropriate. Actually, I think it's like 7,200. But yeah, appropriately priced, great design, great materials. Get this watch if you can. So on that note, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching my first modern Rolex review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that someday you can also get an Oyster Perpetual or any modern Rolex from a dealer. So yeah, subscribe for more videos. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.